first presentation is from Amy Johnson and Katrin Joost, who are part of Source, a digital arts project with Signal Film and Media. So, okay, so that's going to play now, is it?
Thank you. I'll apologise. I'm not able to share my video this evening, but hopefully the audio is working okay and everyone can access the closed captioning okay. So my name is Amy Johnson. I was invited to be part of the exhibition through the Source Artist Lab. Source is a development lab for emerging artists, and it gives artists the opportunity to work alongside Cumbrian cultural institutions and to explore or improve their digital art making techniques. Source was led by Signal Film and Media, an award-winning charity based in Barrow-in-Furness, which specialised in creative film and digital media, and it was carried out in partnership with the Cumbrian Museum Consortium. 7 artists completed the programme, working alongside Wordsworth Trust, Tully House, Signal Film and Media, and Windermere Jetty. I'll put a link in later to the Source website in the chat box for anyone who's interested in checking out some of the other artists. Myself and Katrin Joost were delighted to be partnered with the Wordsworth Trust, and after some initial COVID-related delays, the project for us began in summer 2020. We were briefed, of course, to focus on the Duddon sonnets, and as you've heard, they were published in 1820 and inspired by Wordsworth's many visits to the river and surrounding valley. While the poems were well received, some reviews at the time found the River Duddon to be an unlikely choice. It was perhaps not that well known and was not regarded as a location of any particular interest. In this presentation, I'll show you how my ideas developed after reading the poems and how my relationship with my local river changed as a result of engaging with the poems. Over the course of what turned out to be a very strange year, my local river became increasingly important to me as a place that was both a constant, yet simultaneously ever-changing, and provided much respite and relief in a very difficult time. Most of my work is photography based, so my first instinct was to get out there with my camera. I initially visited the section of river that passes through the village of Seathwaite on a couple of occasions, exploring the route and trying to improve my understanding of the poems. As mentioned, the river might seem to be a bit of a curious choice for Wordsworth to make as his point of focus, especially when you think about the surrounding landscape and some of the more well-known landmarks in the lakes. However, I think you can easily see its charm and appeal. Every twist and turn reveals something new on the journey. Now, readers of his work often feel compelled to track the course of the river, to trace the route and to search for the physical inspiration for the poems. And in researching this project, I followed the same compulsion. I explored the route and I obsessively tracked these different points of interest using paper maps and phone apps. However, this started to become more difficult as we entered this endless cycle of travel restrictions and lockdowns during COVID-19. And I was faced with this concern of how could I complete a project like this when I couldn't actually travel? So with that in mind, I decided I was going to go and find my own River Duddon in my immediate surroundings. Somewhere that perhaps, like the River Duddon, wasn't the most obvious choice, a place that might be regarded as unexceptional or insignificant, and somewhere that, more importantly, I could travel to on foot that would be likely to fall within the travel restrictions, however they were going to turn out. So I found Lauca Beck. It's a river in West Cumbria that in many ways is completely unlike the River Duddon. It's a small, seemingly unremarkable beck that passes through this post-industrial landscape alongside a busy dual carriageway before reaching the sea. The photos I'm showing on screen now are some of my photos taken during my initial explorations. And it was at this point I was experimenting with a technique which involves rephotographing my screen. It's a simple process. I take digital photographs, then I rephotograph them when they are displayed on my laptop screen. And it makes the images soft and blurred. You can make out the pixels and sometimes the surface of the screen, and the image and the colours become more intense. It sort of reminds me of the old hand-coloured tourist postcards you can get. The ones that get reproduced so many times, the colours become vibrant, a bit otherworldly, and it sort of has a soft focus. So I set about exploring Lauca Beck and photographing it as I would the River Duddon. So I was remaining curious as I tracked the route. And as the restrictions continued, it became a regular route for me, and I explored it frequently, taking photographs and collecting objects along the way. For the project, I selected several images from my wanderings, which you can see on screen now. Some are from Lauke Beck and some are from the River Duddon. Now, I like the idea of mixing images from both the Lauke Beck and the River Duddon. In some instances, the difference between the two spaces is really obvious, and others it might not be immediately apparent which location is which. I printed the photographs and then I created 2 geocache points, one near the Wordsworth Trust and one near Lauke Beck. A geocache, for those unfamiliar, is a bit like a digital treasure trail. You can assign GPS coordinates to a hidden point and people can then track the coordinates using a GPS-enabled device. So most people use a mobile phone. My geocaches contain a box with copies of the photos and copies of the poems, and finders are welcome to take a photo or a poem and to scribble down some thoughts and reflections in the notebook. Each box also contains found objects found from each location. So the Wordsworth Trust box has some objects from Lauke Beck. The Lauke Beck box contains objects relating to the River Duddon and the grounds of the Wordsworth Trust. I'll give you a little sneak peek of some of the hiding places I've used. So for the exhibition itself, what you can see at the museum, I wanted to give the audience a glimpse into finding a geocache. So I framed several of my photos along with found objects from the River Duddon and Lauke Beck. And it also contains copies of my handwritten notes and copies of the poems. So here's a little glimpse of them in the exhibition space. And to summarise, Wordsworth's poems helped me to see my surroundings in a new light and to explore with a bit more curiosity. It helped me to appreciate and enjoy my surroundings during a time that was really filled with uncertainty and restriction. And I hope maybe my work might help other people to explore places on their own doorstep and maybe not only to visit the River Duddon, but maybe to find their own version of the River Duddon. So I would like to thank you for listening to my presentation, and a bigger thank you to everyone at Signal Film and Media and all of the Wordsworth Trust staff for their support and advice during the project, especially during such a difficult year. So this concludes my presentation, so I'm going to hand back.
Thank you very much, Amy. That's fascinating. I think so many of us became very invested in our local waterways when we couldn't travel, and they took on quite a sharply defined significance for us during that period. Okay, shall we hear now from Katrin?
Yes, hello. Like Amy, I would very much like to thank both Signal Film and Media and the Source project within that for inviting me to be part of this overall project and inviting me to collaborate with the Wordsworth Trust. And again, I can only echo Amy's thanks for helping us to develop our project in such difficult times. So it was definitely a challenge, but nonetheless, also echoing the previous words, I think it's a fabulous group show, and my work is only a small part of that. So I will now share my screen and hopefully you can see that. Is that okay? Can you see that okay?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, excellent, thank you. I really am a philosopher at heart, and in many ways I'm an artist in not exactly a second place, but my art is very much shaped by philosophy. And my photographic practice has come about through a series of sort of coincidences that are somewhat linked to my philosophical thinking based on phenomenology. Here we go. So here is the first ever accident, as it were, when I was playing with my iPhone whilst I was on the train, and I was just using the panorama function as the train was traveling. And that really started my personal practice of, which I think comes to some sort of culmination in the Duddon project. So I will reflect on this for a little bit more. So you can see a distorted image that is sort of tracking along. And what is really important about that image, that in taking that photograph, the image was built up over a period of time. So this one must have taken about 10, 20 seconds. So what we're looking at is not only a landscape, but a stretch of time. So normally when we sit in a train, we think about what is sort of in our immediate surroundings. And we see, as you can see here in the glimpses of landscapes, fleeting past. And in some ways, my photographs are sort of, my train photographs are echoing this. But I think there's something very evocative about that time spent traveling and how we move through the landscape until it dissolves and we don't see it anymore, as something that we can recognize as a still photograph. So here are some examples of that practice. Now we come to a second accident, as it were, when I was playing again with the phone. I was visiting my family in Munich that time. So this is the River Eden. And John, my partner, John Darwell, who's also a photographer, took a photograph of me whilst I was taking a panorama picture of the River Isar. And a part of that reason for that photograph, as in John taking the photograph of me, is that I stood there for almost 20 minutes taking that picture, because depending on the distance and the movement of the river, the photograph took actually that amount of time to be built up. And here's the photograph I took. So the likeness of that river with the landscape, just going back briefly, is very different, but it very much represents in a very photographic way me being in that particular place, looking at the river for a particular time. So here are some other examples when I spend time by a river. Most of them are, well, this one is of the Eden, near where I live. So the images rip and curl, because the rivers are not necessarily flowing in a nice straight line. So that is reflected in the images as well. Similarly, when I'm photographing, I'm trying to now get in static elements so you can get more of a sense of the time going past. Here's a picture of a river in Sweden. And you can see the distortions of the houses being stretched along. So I've done a project on rivers in general, but now I was invited to think about the River Duddon. So here is same methodology, an image of the River Duddon. And despite the restrictions, I made a strong effort to go to, because echoing that sort of enchantment with that particular river and the reflections on that particular river. I was, like Amy, drawn into that. So I did base my project on actually visiting that river and thinking about the poems. So again, that obsession with the place, I tried out also various digital ways to think about the place. So I was using the 3 words up and was quite intrigued by the serendipity of words that came up, and tried to combine that with the images. Unfortunately, I couldn't combine it with the panorama images. So I, in many ways, mainly because of that, sort of dropped that idea. And here we come to the photographs that sort of ended up in the exhibition. So leaving behind that obsession with the place in terms of mapping and a sort of digital representation of that in terms of using apps, I focused on the panorama function and the serendipity of the phone itself. The way I use my iPhone is very old-fashioned photographic. I don't do any post-production to it, occasionally a little bit of cropping, but most of the images are pretty much as they appear on the screen just after I spend the time by the river. The other thing I really came back to is also the text. I really wanted to reflect on the text, what resonates with my philosophical thoughts. So without going into a phenomenological talk about time and temporality, there are phrases in the Duddon poem cycle that really resonate with my thinkings about time. And Phil mentioned that in his introduction, that the passing of time is a major theme within the work. So I picked out not poems, but phrases from the poems that chime with me and that notion of temporality. So here we have one of my images that is a quote from the poem 34. I see what was and is and will abide. There are stones, we move across the stones, and there's a sort of eternity to the image. And I spent a length of time there, as many other people have. Yet there are also moments and photographic moments that resemble each other and that point to another element of time that is not just the representation of a given moment and taking you there. But I think especially taking momentary pictures of water, you get a sense of the magic of time, that we can actually hop from moment to moment by ghostly power. So here we have not a panorama picture, but a series of stills that chime again with the temporality for me. Similarly here, we've got, in fact, actually failed panoramas, one representing stillness and another one really showing the gush of the water flowing past, and that sort of juxtaposition or mingling of the stillness and the movement is represented in this one. So the soul mingles with eternity, the soul, our being on earth that is limited, then our thinking, our openness, and the openness of our heart being able to relate to something that is bigger than ourselves. And I think that is sort of summing up the work in its whole, the river time, that of time breaks forth triumphant memory in each and every moment we experience. When looking at movement, when we become aware of the limits of our time, whilst we are being dragged along in temporality. I think that image really chimes with this important line of Wordsworth's work. So I hope you can relate to that, and thank you for listening. And again, thank you for having the opportunity to share my work through the multitude of organizations that were involved in this. So I stop screen sharing.
Thank you so much, Amy and Katrin. The photographs are brilliant. I love the way that you respond to, the idea of nature in the river, but also a kind of post-nature. The industrial landscape is very present, certainly in Amy's work. I'm reminded also of the role that technology plays in framing our experience of time and the river. So thank you again for that. It's a wonderful presentation.